There is much to be learned from people who have lived on this land much longer than we have. A knowledge that manifests itself not only in their relationships with nature, their songs and epics, their technology and creations, but in their very survival. Only by being aware of this heritage of the indigenous can we find not only our roots, but our direction. Their pride and ours, captured in one word, Dayaw. A festival that celebrated life, survival, and the continuity of tradition. A gathering that celebrated cultural diversity while proudly proclaiming each group's distinct identity. A forum that aired common aspirations, as well as the struggles and adversities of people still coming to terms with marginalization, poverty, militarization, and the right to their ancestral domain. This was the Dayaw Festival of 2015, celebrated last October in Pampanga. An annual project of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. This year's celebration focused on the theme, Katutubong Kaalaman para sa Kalikasan at Kapayapaan. Indigenous knowledge for the preservation of the environment and peace. Over 400 participants, representing 40 indigenous groups, gathered over 3 days to celebrate through dance, music, ritual, and discussion. The shared struggles of a people to whom this nation still owes so much. And beneath the display of traditional skills, art forms, and expressions was a searing question. As the rest of the nation marches towards inevitable globalization, how do we, the indigenous peoples of the Philippines, survive with our souls, our spirits, and the ancestral lands that have shaped our unique character intact? The dancing that marked the opening parade was both joyful and defiant. It was a show of force from a people determined to survive, determined to sustain their source of Dayaw, our knowledge, our pride. I was there at the Dayaw Festival in Pampanga, where I witnessed an ancient life force manifesting itself through pageantry. Right now, I am here at the National Museum of the Philippines, staring at these terracotta heads, portraits of the long-deceased ancestors that once graced the secondary burial jars discovered in Maitum. The highlight of this collection is one of our national treasures, the Manunggul jar. Discovered by anthropologist Robert Fox while he was excavating the Tabon Cave complex in Palawan, the jar is remarkable for the lid, which features two souls journeying to the afterlife in a boat. While one steers the boat, the figure in front sits with arms crossed over the chest. A poignant image of a soul's journey and transition from living individual to revered ancestor. The same honor, the same remembrance, the same affection and reverence is shown in the portraits from Maitum. Dated to almost 2,000 years, these heads once formed the lids of secondary burial jars. Our ancestors practiced grave exhumation and stored the bones of their loved ones in jars such as these. It has been suggested that the heads are portraits or likenesses of the deceased, as the early potters remember them. Today, they sit in the National Museum collection. Mute, elegant, idealized visions of the honored ancestors. Images of life and continuity, juxtaposed against images of the revered ancestors. For the last episode of this season of Dayaw, we focus on the tradition of revering and honoring our ancestors. What more effective way is there to honor the ways of our forefathers than by carrying their traditions bravely into the future? That sense of obligation to one's ancestors manifests itself in many ways. It could be in the way we lovingly restore and preserve the homes they once lived in. Or in the case of the UNESCO World Heritage City, Vigan, an entire community can come together to show strong political will, a commitment towards preservation.
Huge houses.
Eduardo Quirino, a descendant of the very old Siquia family of Vigan, says that he is the only one of his generation who has chosen to live and perhaps even die in the house his ancestors built.
It was actually a small house in 1751. And over the years, it became bigger and bigger until what you see today. And all the furnitures and ornaments are original pieces. That's what makes this house one of the most interesting colonial houses in the Philippines. Most of my relatives are either abroad, like most Filipinos. They have professions and they earn abroad. Some are in Manila. But I'm the only one that decided to come back here. There are strict rules and guidelines. Before we want anything, we always talk to the mayor. If it's within the guidelines of the Heritage Council, and then there's funding from our congressmen, who then send the funds over to National Historical Commission or National Commission of Culture and Arts.
Guiding the vegan conservation efforts, especially those of private homeowners, is a dynamic Mayor Eva Singson Medina, whose all-inclusive policy has slowly become accepted as Vigan's blueprint for conservation.
So we were thinking, no, Vigan doesn't have the beautiful beaches of Boracay, the beautiful mountain ranges of the Cordilleras. But we do have a very rich culture and history. That's what we use as our capital for development. We used our conservation efforts as our tool for development. And we started off with first bringing in the pride of the people on their place. Vigan was like a warlord country. To barangays, neighboring town were burned to the ground. There was not much economic activity because everyone was scared to put up their business here. So it took a while before we could convince the homeowners to come back. We showed that we knew how to take care of our place. We had to legislate so that we can assure the continuity of whatever efforts we've been doing.
In Vigan's ancestral homes, we find the ancestors honored in ways that preserve their legacy through legislation and local government efforts.
Ang nido sa bu galung kun gun guhadung kedeen lami tambulwan lapung kulun tahagonon.
This year, the Tibolis of Lake Cebu, as well as a community of Filipino cultural workers, mourned the passing of Lang Dulay, a gawad sa manilikha ng Bayan Awardee or Gamaba. She was 91. Bestowed with the award in 1998, honoring her skill at weaving abaca fiber into the traditional Tiboli cloth, tinalak. Lang Dulay produced pieces that remained faithful to the traditions and design repertoire of the Tiboli. In a very real way, Lang Dulay was honoring her own ancestors by continuing to weave the traditional designs. So much has been said about adapting traditional motifs for the commercial market by changing colors, proportions, meanings. While these changes assure the survival and popularization of art forms, it can also lead to the loss of deeper, more complex designs which, in turn, preserve traditional knowledge and belief systems. More than just honoring the ancestors, Lang Dulay also honored the innate skill of present-day Tiboli women, to whom she taught the principles of her craft. By encouraging and nurturing the innate skills of young Tiboli women, she honored the vast stores of knowledge that were their legacy. The wake and funeral of Lang Dulay mixed the elements of the traditional Tiboli burial with flower wreaths and an honor guard. For she had become, in death, not just a Tiboli, but a Filipina who was a source of Dayaw.
Api yang apat kolan gubak kena hai gubak sud alat tehnunuk datu menudal luai sangai ni kemoan ni gi kemulut.
Among the Ibaloy of the Cordillera, honoring a revered ancestor involved more than just feasting at the wakes. The process of mummification ensured that the body of the ancestor would be preserved, not to be seen by others, but to be hidden away in the company of the mummies of other worthy ancestors. Kabayan Benguet is a traditional home of the Ibaloy. 85 kilometers from Baguio City, Kabayan is known as a cradle of Ibaloy culture and the site of many burial caves where mummies once slept in peace. It is said that the end of the practice came with the American pacification of the Cordilleras early in the 20th century. Health reasons and the spread of contagious diseases were the reasons given for forbidding such practice. Since the discovery of several burial caves in Cabayan and other nearby towns in the 1960s, much has been written about the practice. The mummies have become less than revered ancestors, but also objects of curiosity. Carelessly handled by tourists, coveted by collectors for the elaborate tattooing, subjects of theft and vandalism. The process of mummification is in itself a manifestation of indigenous knowledge. Old Ibaloy informants recorded that just before or after breathing his last, the individual was made to ingest quantities of salt water. After death, the corpse would be seated on a high chair while being drained of the body fluids. A fire was also placed near the corpse to hasten the drying process. The other elders would then rub the corpse with the juices of guava and other native plants, which acted both as antiseptic and preservative. The body was then bound in a fetal position before putting it into the log coffins and deposited in the burial graves.
For tourism purposes talaga magandang bisitahin. Pero for cultural point of view, we are actually caught in a dilemma. Wala na nga the process of mummification. It's not practiced anymore. So once they're gone, once they're lost, wala na tayong maipapakita. But we really cannot say to our visitors na hindi na sila pwedeng pumunta dito. It's all over the world. We're just hoping we'll find some ways and means siguro to further preserve for the generations to be able to explore it also.
Today, the tourists who come to Ibaloy to see the last remaining mummies in situ follow strict protocols under the supervision of well-meaning Ibaloy guides. Perhaps, in guarding what is left of these mummies, the present-day Ibaloy are paying their respects to the ancestors in ways they never would have imagined centuries ago. When silence, solitude, and distance from the living were the highest forms of respect for these revered ancestors. So far, Dayaw has brought you facets and vignettes on the vast spectrum of the knowledge systems our indigenous people possess. We've heard chants and epics, seen incredible feats of engineering, technology, craftsmanship, of artistry, all these things that we associate with the colorful, the exotic, the other. But that exotic other, our indigenous people, must live in the same world, in the same country that we do, and with much less than the rights that we have taken for granted. Education, livelihood, integration, infrastructure, the right to property and community. These are what they're still fighting for. These are still the main concerns of the people who have been living on this land much longer than we have. The recent lumad killings that have forced the Manobo of Sitio Hanayanto evacuate their ancestral lands is a complex matter that involves the military, the paramilitary, as well as the rebel forces of the New People's Army. But galvanizing the public's attention is the plight of the Lumad. Their plight echoes those of other indigenous peoples in the Philippines and all over the world who must deal with marginalization and the many problems that come with it, least of all, the loss of their ancestral domain and the lifeways these sustained. At the Dayaw celebration in Pampanga, other indigenous Filipinos share the problems that they face.
As far as this issue is concerned,
marami ang problema sa area namin, pero isa dito, yung pagbabago ng sistema ng pagsasaka. Mula nung yung mga natutunan namin na natural, at yung paggamit ng likas yaman para makapagtanim ng aming mga kakainin.
Gusto natin linawin ito para magani. Una,
the number one big issue sa amin yung processing of ancestral domain, na kung saan medyo masasabi natin na masalimuot dahil nga doon sa conflicting roles or conflicting of policy sa gobyerno. Ang ginawa lang namin na at patuloy yung dialogue, patuloy lang ang paglalabi, tapos pinapaintindi namin sa kanila na ito'y buhay ng katutubong Arumanan, ang kanyang ancestral domain.
Ang kasalukuyang problema na kinakaharap namin at hinahanapan din namin ng paraan ay yung full inclusion of IP rights doon sa binabalangkas na Bangsamoro Basic Law or BBL. Sa karanasan namin sa Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, hindi na ipapatupad ang Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. Na sana sa pamamagitan nitong Basic Law, marisolba na ang lahat ng problemang ito.
Yung karanasan namin mga problema ng mga katutubong kabataan ay una, marami sa kanila hindi nakapag-aral. Kung mayroong mang nakapag-aral ay humihinto dahil hindi makasurvive sa gastusin dahil mahal at malayong school. Yung mga principal, supervisor hindi maintindihan yung Indigenous Peoples Education Learning System kasi sinasabi nila na hindi daw yun nakaangkla ng Quito 12. Yung mga bata ay magiging estudyante.
Pangunahing problema sa amin ay ang lupang ninuno namin. Dahil ito yung nakalagay dito, yung inilalagay ng gobyerno ngayon, yung malaking mga project na Dambuhalang Dam, yung New Centennial Dam na itatayo sa aming lugar. Kaya doon, maapektuhan yung aming mga lupaing ninuno, yung aming taniman, yung aming tirahan, ang kabuuan ng kalikasan ng Sierra Madre, na dito kami nakatira.
After hearing all these, we can only ask, how can the ways of our ancestors be preserved if the very lifeways they held dear are now endangered? If the source of their Dayaw goes, what will we have lost?
Well, in spite of these problems, I think the indigenous peoples will only get stronger because Filipinos are now realizing their plight and they get help from all the sectors. Even the students are alarmed at what is happening to them. The academic people, NGOs, and even some sectors of the government are really trying to do their best to help them get all the kinds of support, shelter, food, but most of all, there is now a recognition even in other countries, of the importance of helping these indigenous peoples.
More than just a deeper appreciation of their cultural achievements, I hope that this episode of Dayaw has given you a deeper understanding of the one quality that has enabled our indigenous people to survive. Through the long history of colonization, of marginalization, of being second-class citizens in their own country, through the loss of their ancestral lands and so many other life-threatening problems, the indigenous people of the Philippines have shown their resilience. The process of empowerment may be slow, even painful, but they are claiming it. And they ask nothing more from us than our awareness to break through the walls of indifference so that our voices will add to theirs. To be finally, truthfully united with indigenous peoples in their struggles is the most lasting and resilient lesson in preserving Dayaw, our knowledge, our pride.